When I brought my husband his forgotten lunch, his secretary knocked over her purse, rushing to call him. His wedding ring tumbled out across the floor. I pretended not to see it, smiled, and left quietly. At their office Christmas party 2 weeks later, I walked in late with my divorce lawyer as my plus one. What happened next made every partner in that law firm wish they'd never hired either of them. My name is Harmony Solace, and for 8 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I believed I was living the American dream. At 34, I had everything a woman was supposed to want: a successful attorney husband, a pristine colonial home in Westchester's most coveted neighborhood, and a thriving interior design business that catered to Manhattan's elite. Preston Harlan, my husband, was a rising star at Abernathy and Associates, one of the city's most prestigious corporate law firms. We were the couple other couples envied: beautiful, successful, seemingly perfect. Every morning began the same way. I'd wake at 5:30 a.m. to prepare Preston's coffee exactly how he liked it: dark roast, 1 sugar, splash of cream. While he showered, I'd pack his lunch in the insulated bag I'd bought him for our 3rd anniversary: turkey and Swiss on sourdough, an apple, and his favorite chocolate chip cookies from the bakery on 5th Avenue. It was a ritual that grounded us, a small act of love in our increasingly busy lives. Preston would emerge from our marble bathroom, looking like he'd stepped from a magazine: tailored Tom Ford suit, perfectly styled dark hair, the confident smile that had first attracted me at Columbia Law School's alumni mixer 9 years ago. He'd kiss my cheek, grab his briefcase and lunch, and head off to conquer another day of corporate mergers and acquisitions. "You spoil me, Harmony," he'd say. The same phrase every morning, accompanied by that charming grin that made my stomach flutter even after all these years. Our Westchester home was my masterpiece, a 1920s colonial I'd meticulously restored and decorated. Every room told a story of careful curation: the antique Persian rugs I'd found at estate sales, the custom built-ins that housed Preston's law books, the kitchen island where we'd hosted countless dinner parties for his colleagues and my clients. House Beautiful had featured it in their Young Couples Living Large spread 2 years ago, cementing my reputation as one of New York's most sought-after residential designers. My client roster read like a who's who of Manhattan society: tech entrepreneurs, investment bankers, Broadway producers, even a few celebrities who valued discretion over publicity. The Abernathy penthouse renovation had been my crowning achievement, a $2.8 million project that transformed their dated Park Avenue space into a modern masterpiece. The photos from that job had landed me 3 more 8-figure projects, and a waiting list that stretched 6 months out. Preston and I moved through New York's social circles with practiced ease: charity galas at the Met, weekend retreats in the Hamptons, wine tastings in Soho. We were always invited, always photographed, always perfectly dressed and appropriately charming. I'd learned to navigate these waters during my childhood in Greenwich, where my mother, Evelyn Solace, had trained me in the delicate art of maintaining appearances, while my father built his real estate empire. "Presentation is everything, darling," she'd told me countless times. "People judge you in the first 30 seconds. Make sure those seconds count." The lessons had served me well. I could discuss market trends with Preston's partners, recommend the perfect wine for any occasion, and plan events that left lasting impressions. My Instagram account, at Harmony Solace Design, had 127,000 followers, who hung on my every carefully curated post. The life I displayed there wasn't fictional, it was real, beautiful, and exactly what I'd always dreamed of having. Preston's career trajectory seemed unstoppable. At 36, he was already being whispered about as the youngest potential partner in Abernathy and Associates' 150-year history. The Whitmore Industries merger he'd been leading for the past year was worth $4.2 billion, the kind of deal that made careers and secured legacies. Managing partners took notice when your billable hours consistently topped the charts and your client retention rate remained flawless. We'd started talking about children more seriously in recent months. The 3rd bedroom in our house had been designated as the future nursery, and I'd begun collecting design ideas for creating the perfect space for our future family. Preston wanted to make partner first, establish financial security, buy the house in East Hampton we'd been eyeing. Everything in its proper time, he'd say, when I brought up the subject. Let's build the foundation before we add to it. Our social calendar revolved around his firm's events and my industry functions. Next week's Christmas party at Abernathy and Associates was always the highlight of December, a lavish affair at the Rainbow Room, where the city's legal elite gathered to celebrate another successful year. I'd already selected my dress, a midnight blue Vera Wang that highlighted my auburn hair and brought out my green eyes. Preston had requested I wear the diamond necklace he'd given me for our 5th anniversary, the one that caught the light perfectly in photographs. My business was thriving beyond my wildest expectations. The Meridian Tower project, 40 luxury condos requiring complete design packages, would gross my firm nearly $3 million over the next 18 months. I'd hired 2 additional designers and a project manager just to handle the overflow. Success felt intoxicating, validation for all the years of 16-hour days, and perfectionist attention to detail that had built my reputation. Everything in our life felt intentional, curated, perfect. Our dinner parties featured carefully selected guest lists that mixed Preston's legal contacts with my design world connections. Our vacation photos from Tuscany and Santorini garnered hundreds of likes and comments from friends who lived vicariously through our adventure. Even our arguments were conducted with the politeness of 2 people who understood the importance of maintaining dignity under pressure. Looking back, I realize how much energy we both invested in the performance of our perfect marriage. Every public appearance was choreographed, every social media post calculated for maximum impact. We were brand ambassadors for our own relationship, selling an image of success and happiness that we'd convinced ourselves was real. But perfection, I was about to learn, is often just another word for well-constructed illusion. And illusions, no matter how beautiful, can shatter with the sound of a wedding ring hitting a marble floor. December 14th started like any other Tuesday. I had 3 client consultations scheduled, a conference call with the Meridian Tower developers, and lunch with my assistant Mariana to discuss the spring project calendar. Preston had left for the office earlier than usual, something about preparing for a crucial Whitmore Industries presentation. In his rush, he'd forgotten his lunch on the kitchen counter beside his coffee mug. It was such a small oversight, the kind of domestic detail that seemed insignificant. I had no way of knowing that delivering his forgotten lunch would shatter 8 years of carefully constructed perfection and reveal the man I thought I knew as a complete stranger. At 11:30 a.m., I stood in my kitchen holding Preston's forgotten lunch bag, debating whether to make the 40-minute drive into Manhattan. My afternoon was packed with client meetings, and the Meridian Tower conference call was scheduled for 2 p.m. But Preston had an important presentation today, something about securing the final signatures on the Whitmore deal that would cement his path to partnership. He'd need his energy, and I knew he'd skip eating entirely if left to his own devices. The drive into the city gave me time to mentally prepare for my afternoon consultations. Mrs. Abernathy, no relation to Preston's firm despite the name, wanted to completely redesign her Park Avenue Apartments master suite. The project could easily run $800,000, and she'd specifically requested me after seeing my work in Architectural Digest. These were the clients who made my reputation, women who understood that exceptional design was an investment in lifestyle, not just decoration. Abernathy and Associates occupied floors 37 through 42 of a gleaming midtown tower, their reception area a monument to old money elegance and new money success. The walls displayed black and white photographs of the firm's founding partners alongside newer color portraits of current managing partners. Preston's photo would join them soon, once the partnership vote was finalized. At 36, he'd be the youngest face on that wall in the firm's history. Mrs. Harlan, the receptionist, a polished young woman whose name I'd embarrassingly forgotten despite meeting her dozens of times, smiled brightly. "How lovely to see you. Are you here for the lunch meeting?" I hesitated, confused. "Lunch meeting? Oh, I just assumed Mr. Harlan mentioned he had lunch plans today. Is everything all right?" "Yes, of course. He just forgot his lunch at home. I thought I'd drop it off before my afternoon appointments." She directed me toward the elevators with practiced efficiency. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Preston's office was on the 40th floor, corner suite with views of Central Park that clients found appropriately impressive. The elevator hummed quietly as it climbed, giving me a moment to appreciate the familiar scent of expensive leather and subtle cologne that seemed to permeate everything in this building. The 40th floor buzzed with the controlled energy of successful attorneys pursuing billable hours. Associates hunched over laptops, phones pressed to ears, voices discussing merger terms and acquisition details. The partners' offices lined the exterior walls, their glass doors offering glimpses of mahogany furniture and wall-mounted diplomas. Preston's corner office sat at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. As I approached, I could hear his voice through the opening, that confident tone he used when explaining complex legal concepts to clients. He was discussing timeline adjustments for document review, something about expediting the due diligence process. I paused, not wanting to interrupt what sounded like an important call. That's when I noticed her, Kathy Abernathy. Preston had mentioned her several times over the past year, always in the context of her exceptional organizational skills and attention to detail. She'd started as his secretary 18 months ago, fresh from NYU with a business degree and ambitions of attending law school herself. Preston had been impressed by her initiative, how quickly she'd learned the intricacies of corporate law procedures. She sat at her desk outside his office, blonde hair pulled back in a sleek chignon, wearing a charcoal gray dress that was both professional and subtly flattering. Her workspace was immaculately organized, files arranged by priority, calendar color-coded by client, fresh flowers in a small crystal vase that caught the afternoon light. Everything about her screamed competence and sophistication. I approached her desk with a smile. "Hi, Kathy. I'm Harmony, Preston's wife. We've spoken on the phone several times." Her face lit up with recognition, though something flickered in her blue eyes. Was it surprise? Discomfort? "Mrs. Harlan. Of course, it's so nice to finally meet you in person. Preston speaks about you constantly. He forgot his lunch this morning," I explained, holding up the insulated bag. "I was in the city for client meetings and thought I'd drop it off. I know how he gets when his blood sugar drops." She laughed, a musical sound that seemed genuine. "He does get rather grumpy when he's hungry. Let me tell him you're here." As she reached for her phone to call Preston's extension, her elbow caught the corner of her leather handbag, which sat precariously close to the edge of her desk. The bag tumbled to the floor with a soft thud, its contents scattering across the marble tiles. "Oh no," she exclaimed, immediately dropping to her knees to gather the spilled items. "How clumsy of me." I instinctively knelt to help, reaching for a tube of lipstick that had rolled under her chair. That's when I saw it, a flash of gold among the scattered contents. A ring, not just any ring, but a thick gold band that caught the overhead lights with familiar brilliance. My heart stopped. Preston's wedding ring. The one I'd watched him slide onto his finger 8 years ago at St. Patrick's Cathedral. The one engraved with our wedding date and the words "Forever Yours" in elegant script. The one that bore a small scratch on the band from when he'd accidentally scraped it against our car door last summer. For a moment, time suspended. I stared at the ring lying beside Kathy's scattered makeup, breath caught in my throat, mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Why would Preston's wedding ring be in his secretary's purse? Why wasn't it on his finger where it belonged? My hands moved automatically, helping gather her things while my brain spun through possibilities. Maybe he'd taken it off to wash his hands and asked her to hold it. Maybe it had slipped off. He'd lost weight recently from stress about the partnership decision. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation that would make sense once I asked him about it. But even as I constructed these rational explanations, something cold and sick was spreading through my chest. The way Kathy's face had flushed when the bag fell, how quickly she'd scrambled to collect everything, her movements suddenly frantic rather than graceful. The slight tremor in her hands as she swept items back into her purse. "Thank you so much," she said breathlessly, accepting her compact mirror from my outstretched hand. "I'm usually much more coordinated than this." Handed her the lipstick I'd retrieved, watching carefully as she returned everything to her bag. The ring had vanished back inside, tucked away among the normal detritus of a working woman's life. Phone, wallet, breath mints, wedding ring that didn't belong to her. No problem at all, I replied, my voice sounding remarkably steady considering the earthquake happening inside my chest. We've all been there. She stood, smoothing her dress and checking her hair in the small mirror on her desk. The flush was fading from her cheeks, professional composure reasserting itself. When she looked at me again, her smile seemed forced, not quite reaching her eyes. Let me call Preston now, she said, reaching for her phone with hands that still trembled slightly. I watched her dial his extension, heard her explain that his wife was here with lunch, saw her nod at whatever he said in response. Everything looked normal, professional, exactly as it should. But I knew what I'd seen. Preston's wedding ring had been in his secretary's purse, and no innocent explanation could account for that fact. He'll be right out, Kathy said, hanging up the phone with a smile that didn't quite mask the tension around her eyes. He's just finishing up a call with the Whitmore executives. I nodded, settling into one of the leather chairs in the reception area outside Preston's office. My hands gripped the lunch bag tighter than necessary, knuckles white against the navy fabric. The ring's image burned in my mind, that distinctive scratch, the way it had caught the light, the familiar weight of gold I'd seen on Preston's finger every single day for 8 years. Can I get you some coffee while you wait? Kathy asked, her voice artificially bright. We have that Italian blend you mentioned liking when you called about Preston's birthday dinner reservations. The casual reference to our personal life sent another chill through me. How many details of our marriage had Preston shared with her? And why would he discuss something as intimate as my coffee preferences with his secretary? No thank you, I managed, watching her carefully. I have afternoon appointments, I can't stay long. She returned to her computer, fingers flying over the keyboard with practiced efficiency. But I noticed her glancing at her purse every few seconds, as if checking to ensure it was still securely closed. The bag sat now on the floor beside her desk, zipped tight and pushed well away from the edge. Preston's office door opened, and he emerged with that $1 million smile that had charmed judges, clients and me for nearly a decade. He looked every inch the successful attorney in his charcoal Armani suit, silk tie perfectly knotted, not a hair out of place. But something was different. My eyes went immediately to his left hand, and my stomach dropped. No wedding ring. Harmony. What a wonderful surprise, he said, crossing to kiss my cheek. His left hand rested on my shoulder, and I could see the pale band of skin where his ring should have been. You didn't need to drive all the way into the city just for lunch. You forgot it this morning, I said, holding out the bag while studying his face. I know how important today's presentation is. I didn't want you to be distracted by hunger. He accepted the lunch with apparent gratitude, but I caught something, a quick glance toward Kathy's desk, so brief I almost missed it. She was studiously focused on her computer screen, but the slight tightening around her eyes suggested she was listening to every word. You're an angel, Preston said, the endearment falling from his lips with practiced ease. The Whitmore meeting is in 2 hours, and I've been so focused on preparation I completely forgot about eating. Where's your ring? I asked quietly, the question emerging before I could stop myself. For just a moment, perhaps 1/10 of a second, his expression faltered. Then the smile returned, accompanied by a casual laugh that sounded completely natural. Had to take it off earlier when I was reviewing documents with coffee, he explained, rubbing his finger absently. Must have left it in the washroom. You know how paranoid I get about staining important papers. The explanation sounded reasonable, delivered with Preston's usual confidence. But I'd lived with this man for 8 years, studied his face across 1,000 dinner tables, learned to read the subtle tells that indicated stress or uncertainty. The slight tension at the corners of his eyes, the way his left hand unconsciously moved to touch his wedding finger, the almost imperceptible pause before he'd answered my question. I should let you get back to work, I said, standing and smoothing my coat. Good luck with the presentation, thank you for bringing lunch. I love you, he said, the words automatic and warm. But as he leaned in for another kiss, I noticed his cologne was different, stronger, more expensive than his usual choice. I said goodbye to Kathy, who looked up from her computer with that too bright smile. So lovely to finally meet you, Mrs. Harlan. Preston is lucky to have someone who takes such good care of him. The words felt loaded somehow, weighted with meaning I couldn't quite decipher. I thanked her and headed toward the elevators, my mind spinning with questions and half-formed suspicions. The elevator doors closed, and I finally allowed myself to breathe deeply. My reflection in the polished steel doors showed a composed woman in an elegant coat, auburn hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, but my green eyes betrayed the turmoil beneath the surface. I looked like someone trying very hard to maintain control while their world shifted beneath their feet. The ride down 40 floors gave me time to think. Preston's wedding ring in his secretary's purse. His casual explanation about washing his hands. The way Kathy had moved so quickly to gather her scattered belongings. Her obvious discomfort when I'd helped retrieve her things. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe Preston had simply asked her to hold his ring while he washed his hands, and she'd forgotten to return it. Maybe the tension I'd sensed was just professional stress about the Whitmore deal. Maybe I was reading sinister meaning into perfectly innocent interactions. But as I walked through the lobby toward the parking garage, other memories began surfacing. Preston working late more frequently over the past 6 months. Weekend calls from the office that seemed to last longer than necessary. The way he'd started password protecting his phone, claiming it was a new security requirement from the firm. His sudden interest in going to the gym, the new cologne, the subtle changes in his appearance that I'd attributed to career ambition. And there was something else, a nagging feeling that I'd been willfully blind to signs I should have noticed. The way he'd started mentioning Kathy's name more frequently in casual conversation. How he'd praised her organizational skills, her attention to detail, her dedication to staying late when important deals required extra work. I'd been pleased that he had such competent support, never considering that his appreciation might extend beyond professional admiration. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from Preston. "Thank you again for lunch, you're amazing. See you tonight for dinner at Romano's, 7:30 reservation. Love you. Romano's." Our anniversary restaurant, where he'd proposed 3 years into our relationship. We hadn't been there in months, but he'd chosen it for tonight. Was this guilt? An attempt to assuage his conscience after I'd nearly discovered something I wasn't supposed to see. I sat in my car in the parking garage, staring at the text message, trying to reconcile the loving husband who remembered our special places with the man whose wedding ring I'd just found in another woman's purse. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across my dashboard, making everything look cold and unfamiliar. For 8 years, I'd prided myself on knowing Preston completely. I knew he took his coffee black in the morning, but with cream in the afternoon. I knew he read legal briefs in bed when he couldn't sleep. I knew he called his mother every Sunday and sent flowers to his assistant on Administrative Professionals Day. But sitting in that garage, surrounded by the concrete and steel of Manhattan's underground, I realized how much I might not know about the man I'd married. And for the first time in our relationship, I was afraid to find out. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after receiving Preston's text, staring at the concrete walls of the parking garage while my mind raced through months of memories I'd never questioned before. The underground fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in stark, unflattering clarity that seemed to mirror my sudden ability to see patterns I'd been blind to. Romano's reservation. Our special place. Preston had proposed there on a snowy February evening, 3 years into our relationship, the entire restaurant decorated with white roses he'd secretly arranged with the owner. The same restaurant where we'd celebrated every major milestone, his first major case victory, my first Architectural Digest feature, both our birthdays for the past 5 years. But we hadn't been there since our anniversary 6 months ago. Preston had claimed he was too busy with the Whitmore deal for romantic dinners, that we should wait until after he made partner to celebrate properly. So why Romano's tonight? Why the sudden gesture after months of canceled dinner plans and hurried takeout meals eaten while he worked on his laptop? My phone buzzed with a text from Mariana, my assistant. The 2 p.m. Meridian call has been moved to 2:30, Mrs. Chen's appointment confirmed for 4 p.m. Hope the lunch delivery went smoothly. Lunch delivery. Such an innocent phrase for what had just shattered my understanding of my marriage. I typed back a quick confirmation, my fingers trembling slightly as I tried to maintain the appearance of normalcy while my world tilted on its axis. I pulled out of the parking garage and into Manhattan traffic, but instead of heading directly to my office, I found myself driving aimlessly through Midtown, my subconscious working through memories while my conscious mind struggled to process what I'd witnessed. 6 months ago. That's when things had started changing, wasn't it? Preston had begun working later, claiming the Whitmore acquisition required unprecedented attention to detail. He'd hired Kathy around that same time, praising her qualifications and work ethic. "She's exactly what I need to handle this level of complexity," he'd said. "Smart, organized, completely dedicated." Dedicated. The word took on new meaning now. I remembered the first time he'd mentioned her name at dinner. "Kathy caught an error in the Johnson contract that could have cost us millions," he'd said. Clearly impressed, "She has an eye for detail that rivals most associates." I'd been pleased that he had such competent support, never considering that his admiration might be anything more than professional. Then there were the weekend calls. Preston had always been available to clients, but the frequency had increased dramatically over the past few months. Saturday morning calls that stretched into the afternoon. Sunday evening conferences that lasted until bedtime. "Kathy's coordinating with the London office," he'd explain, "or she's managing the document review schedule." Always Kathy. Always requiring his immediate attention. I thought about his new gym membership, started 4 months ago. "I need to be in better shape for partnership," he'd said. "First impressions matter in client meetings." The weight loss had been gradual but noticeable. His suits fit better, his confidence seemed higher, and I'd been proud of his dedication to self-improvement. The cologne change had happened around the same time. A shift from the woody traditional scent I'd bought him for Christmas to something more modern, more seductive. "Tom Ford," he'd said, when I complimented it. Kathy mentioned it was professional but not stuffy. Even his fragrance choices were being influenced by his secretary's opinions. And then there were the small changes I'd attributed to career stress. The way he'd started password protecting his phone, claiming new security protocols from the firm. How he'd begun closing his laptop when I entered his home office, explaining that client confidentiality required extra caution. The increase in business trips that seemed to coincide with Kathy's schedule. She'd mentioned needing to coordinate travel arrangements during our brief phone conversations. My phone rang, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. My mother's name appeared on the screen, and I almost let it go to voicemail before deciding I needed the distraction of normal conversation. "Darling," Evelyn Solis's cultured voice filled the car through the Bluetooth system. "I just wanted to confirm that you and Preston are still joining us for the Waldorf Charity Gala next weekend. The seating chart is being finalized today." "Yes, Mother. We'll be there," I said automatically, though the idea of maintaining social pretenses suddenly felt exhausting. "Wonderful. Your father is particularly excited about introducing Preston to the Whitmore board members who'll be attending. This acquisition of his could open so many doors." The Whitmore deal. Everything seemed to circle back to that massive transaction that was supposed to secure Preston's partnership and our financial future. But what if it was securing something else entirely? What if the long hours and weekend work sessions weren't just about legal documents and due diligence? "Harmony? Are you there? Sorry, Mother. Traffic is terrible today." "Well, do drive carefully. And remind Preston that cocktails start at 7. Your father wants plenty of time to make introductions before dinner." After ending the call, I sat at a red light thinking about the charity gala. Another elegant event where Preston and I would play our roles as the perfect successful couple. I'd wear something appropriately stunning, he'd charm everyone with his legal expertise and bright future, and we'd dance to the orchestra while Manhattan's elite watched approvingly. But now I wondered who else might be there. Would Kathy attend as part of the firm's support staff? Would I have to watch Preston interact with her professionally while knowing what I'd discovered today? The thought made my stomach clench with a combination of nausea and rage. My office building came into view, and I forced myself to focus on the afternoon ahead. 2 client consultations, the Meridian conference call, and a design review meeting that would determine the direction of a $1.2 million project. My professional life demanded the same attention to detail and perfectionism that had made my reputation, regardless of what was happening in my personal life. But as I pulled into my reserved parking space, I made a decision that surprised me with its clarity. I wasn't going to confront Preston tonight at Romano's. I wasn't going to demand explanations or accusations based on one shocking moment in his secretary's office. Instead, I was going to investigate. Carefully, methodically, with the same precision I applied to my design projects. If Preston was having an affair with Kathy, and the evidence was pointing in that direction, I needed to know the full scope of his deception before I acted. How long had it been going on? How serious was their relationship? What other lies had he told me? And most importantly, what did I want to do with whatever information I uncovered? I gathered my purse and portfolio, checking my appearance in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me appeared completely composed, auburn hair sleek, makeup perfect, green eyes clear and determined. She looked like someone in complete control of her life and circumstances. But inside, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss that might contain the wreckage of everything I'd built my identity around. The question was whether I had the courage to jump, or if I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what lay hidden in the darkness below. The afternoon's first client was waiting upstairs, ready to discuss transforming her Park Avenue penthouse into something worthy of magazine covers. I would smile, listen to her vision, and create something beautiful from her dreams and desires. It was what I did best, taking someone's hopes and making them reality. Now I needed to apply those same skills to uncovering the reality of my own life, no matter how devastating that truth might prove to be. The Meridian Tower conference call stretched longer than expected, running until nearly 4 p.m. as we discussed marble selections and fixture specifications for the luxury condos. Normally, I thrived on these detailed discussions about materials and timelines, but today I found myself going through the motions while my mind churned with plans that had nothing to do with interior design. Mrs. Chen arrived precisely at 4 o'clock for her consultation, a punctual woman in her 60s, who'd made her fortune in tech investments, and now wanted to transform her Upper East Side brownstone into what she called understated elegance with Asian influences. I walked her through portfolio images and fabric samples, discussing color palettes and spatial flow, all while part of my brain worked on a completely different kind of project. I want something that feels both timeless and contemporary, Mrs. Chen explained, running her fingers over a silk fabric sample, something that honors tradition while embracing the future. Her words resonated more deeply than she could have known. I was facing the same challenge in my personal life, how to honor the 8 years Preston and I had built together while facing the possibility that our future was built on lies. After Mrs. Chen left with preliminary sketches and a promise to review my full proposal by Monday, I locked my office door and opened my laptop. If I was going to investigate my husband's relationship with his secretary, I needed to approach it with the same methodical planning I applied to million-dollar renovations. I started by accessing our shared financial accounts, joint checking, savings, credit cards. Preston had insisted on complete financial transparency when we married, claiming it demonstrated trust and partnership. No secrets between us, he'd said, as we combined our accounts. The irony wasn't lost on me now as I used that transparency to search for evidence of his deception. The credit card statements revealed patterns I'd never noticed before. Regular charges at restaurants I'd never heard of, always during lunch hours. Hotel charges in the city when Preston claimed to be working late at the office. A jewelry purchase from Tiffany 2 months ago for $2,800 that definitely hadn't been for me. Our anniversary was in October, my birthday in March, and neither occasion had included Tiffany gifts. My hands trembled as I clicked through the statements, finding charge after charge that told a story of deception. Dinners at intimate restaurants in neighborhoods we never visited together, weekend hotel stays when he'd claimed to be working on document reviews, even a charge for flowers, $150 at an upscale florist, on a Tuesday, when I'd received nothing. I screenshot everything, creating a digital file labeled Financial Review that could pass for legitimate business documentation if anyone happened to see it. Each image was damning evidence of a double life I'd never suspected. Next, I accessed our phone records through our family plan account. Preston's calls and texts were listed in detail, and one number appeared with shocking frequency. I cross-referenced it with the Abernathy and Associates directory online, Kathy's cell phone. Over the past 3 months they'd exchanged hundreds of text messages and phone calls, often late at night and on weekends. Some calls lasted hours. On nights when Preston had claimed to be working late at the office, his phone record showed extended conversations with Kathy from our home number. He'd been talking to her while sitting in his study, sometimes while I was in the next room reading or watching television. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just an affair, it was a complete parallel relationship conducted under my nose in my own home. I forwarded all the phone records to my secure email account, then began planning my next moves. The office Christmas party was in 10 days, December 22nd at the Rainbow Room. Preston had mentioned it repeatedly over the past month, emphasizing how important it was for his partnership prospects. All the managing partners would be there, along with major clients and their spouses. It was exactly the kind of high-visibility event where reputations were made and destroyed. An idea began forming, audacious and terrifying in its scope. If Preston was conducting his affair publicly enough to attend restaurants and hotels around the city, if he was bold enough to carry on extended phone conversations from our home, then perhaps it was time for his deception to become as public as his ambition. But I needed help, professional help from someone who understood both the legal and strategic implications of what I was considering. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I'd hoped never to use. Mariana Abernathy, not related to Preston's law firm despite sharing the name, was Manhattan's most notorious divorce attorney. Known for her scorched-earth tactics and ability to secure massive settlements for her clients, she'd earned the nickname the Destroyer in legal circles. Abernathy Law, a crisp voice answered. "This is Harmony Solace," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to schedule a consultation with Miss Abernathy. It's regarding a potential divorce case. I can offer you an appointment next week. May I ask how you heard about our services?" I thought of Mrs. Henderson, a client whose divorce settlement had been splashed across the society pages 2 years ago. Mariana had secured her a $40 million settlement in custody of their children after exposing her husband's affairs with 3 different women. "Mrs. Henderson recommended her," I said. "Ah yes, let me check Miss Abernathy's schedule. Would tomorrow at 2 p.m. work for you?" Tomorrow, less than 24 hours to prepare for a conversation that would set in motion the end of my marriage. But Preston had made his choices over the past 6 months, conducting his affair with increasing boldness while I remained obliviously supportive of his career and our life together. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m. is perfect," I confirmed. As I hung up and began organizing the evidence I'd gathered, I realized that Preston's greatest mistake hadn't been having an affair. It had been underestimating the woman he'd married. He'd seen my perfectionism and attention to detail as charming domestic qualities, never considering that those same skills could be turned toward uncovering his deceptions. The office Christmas party was 10 days away. That gave me time to prepare, to plan, and to ensure that when the truth finally came out, it would be on my terms and in the most devastating way possible. After all, Preston had always said presentation was everything in the legal world. He was about to discover just how effective a perfectly executed presentation could be. The Rainbow Room sparkled with all the grandeur that had made it Manhattan's premier event space for nearly a century. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the assembled legal elite, while floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city 49 floors below. The Abernathy and Associates Christmas party was in full swing. Partners and associates mingling with clients and spouses in an elegant dance of business relationships, disguised as holiday celebration. I arrived fashionably late at 8:30 p.m., deliberately missing the cocktail hour, where early arrivals would have had time to process my unexpected guest. The midnight blue Vera Wang dress I'd selected months ago fit perfectly, the diamond necklace Preston had given me, for our anniversary catching the chandelier light as intended. But tonight, everything that had once symbolized our perfect life together served a different purpose entirely. Mrs. Harlan, the hostess, greeted me warmly. "How lovely to see you. Your table is number 12, near the windows." "Thank you," I replied, scanning the room until I spotted Preston near the bar, resplendent in his Tom Ford tuxedo, champagne flute in hand, as he discussed something with senior partner Oscar Solis. Kathy stood nearby in a stunning emerald green gown that complemented her blonde hair perfectly, playing the role of dutiful secretary, while staying close enough to be included in the conversation. They looked comfortable together, I realized. Natural, like a couple who'd spent significant time in each other's company, learning each other's rhythms and preferences. The observation sent a familiar stab of pain through my chest, but it was followed immediately by something colder and more determined. Harmony. I turned to see Mariana Abernathy approaching, elegant in a black cocktail dress that managed to look both professional and devastating. At 45, she commanded attention in any room, her silver hair styled in a severe bob that framed sharp cheekbones and intelligent gray eyes. In the 10 days since our first consultation, she'd become my closest ally and strategic advisor. "You look absolutely radiant," she said, air-kissing my cheek in the practiced manner of Manhattan society. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter. "Has everything been arranged?" The photographer from the Times is positioned near the stage. The reporter has her notebook ready. Your evidence packet is secure. Mariana's smile never wavered, but her eyes held the sharp focus of a predator preparing to strike. Remember, timing is everything. Wait for the toast. Preston's annual toast was a tradition at these parties, a moment when the rising star thanked his colleagues and clients for another successful year. This year, with the Whitmore deal finally closing and his partnership vote scheduled for January, the toast would be particularly significant. Every managing partner, major client and influential spouse would be watching. I made my way through the crowd, accepting compliments on my dress and discussing holiday plans with familiar faces. Several people commented on how radiant I looked, how happy Preston and I seemed together. If only they knew that my radiance came from the clarity of purpose that had sustained me through 10 days of meticulous planning. Harmony. Preston materialized at my elbow, his smile broad and genuine as he leaned in to kiss my cheek. "You look absolutely stunning tonight. I was starting to worry you'd gotten lost in traffic." "Last-minute client emergency," I lied smoothly. "You know how demanding the holiday season can be." He introduced me to several clients I hadn't met before, his arm around my waist in the possessive gesture that had once made me feel cherished and protected. Now it felt like performance, a public display designed to reinforce his image as a successful family man. Kathy appeared at his other side, tablet in hand with what appeared to be important documents. "Preston, the Jakarta office sent their final approval on the Morrison amendments. Everything's ready for Monday's signature." "Excellent," he replied, his hand briefly touching hers as he took the tablet. The gesture lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but I caught the subtle caress of his thumb across her knuckles. "You've been invaluable through this entire process, Kathy. I don't know what I would have done without you." Their eyes met for just a moment, and I saw something pass between them that had nothing to do with legal documents or professional collaboration. It was intimate, familiar, loaded with the kind of understanding that develops between people who share secrets. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced from the small stage at the front of the room. "If I could have your attention, please. Preston Harlan would like to say a few words." This was it. The moment I'd been planning for 10 days, the culmination of evidence gathering and strategic preparation. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands remained steady as Preston handed me his champagne flute and made his way toward the stage. He moved with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable, whose charm and intelligence had carried him through every challenge life had presented. The crowd quieted respectfully as he took the microphone, 200 of Manhattan's legal elite turning their attention to the young partner-elect who represented the future of corporate law. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Preston began, his voice carrying easily through the sound system. "This has been a remarkable year for all of us at Abernathy and Associates." I caught Mariana's eye across the room. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and I saw her reach into her evening bag for the phone that would record everything about to unfold. Preston continued his remarks, thanking clients and colleagues, discussing the successful closure of major deals and the firm's bright prospects for the coming year. He looked every inch the successful attorney, the perfect husband, the man who had everything. But in 30 seconds his carefully constructed world was about to crumble in the most public way possible. And this time, I would be the one controlling the narrative. I'd also like to thank someone very special, Preston continued, his voice warm with apparent sincerity as he gazed out over the assembled crowd. My beautiful wife Harmony, who has supported my career every step of the way. Her love and dedication have made all of this possible. The crowd murmured approvingly as Preston raised his champagne flute in my direction. I smiled and lifted my own glass, playing the role of the adoring wife one final time. Around me, guests turned to look at me with admiration and perhaps a touch of envy for my seemingly perfect marriage. To partnerships, Preston announced, his voice carrying across the silent room, both professional and personal, to the bonds that make us stronger and the trust that makes success possible. To partnerships, the crowd echoed, raising their glasses in unison. That's when I stepped forward, my voice cutting clearly through the celebratory atmosphere. Speaking of partnerships, Preston, I have something to share with everyone about yours. The room fell silent, sensing a shift in energy even if they couldn't yet identify its source. Preston's smile faltered slightly as he looked down at me from the stage, confusion flickering in his eyes. Harmony, darling, this is hardly the time. Actually, it's the perfect time, I interrupted, moving toward the front of the room where everyone could see me clearly. When better to discuss trust and partnerships than when all your colleagues and clients are gathered together. Mariana materialized beside me, pulling a thick manila envelope from her evening bag. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mariana Abernathy, of Abernathy Law. Mrs. Harlan has asked me to present some documents that shed light on the true nature of Mr. Harlan's partnerships. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. Several managing partners exchanged glances, clearly recognizing Mariana's reputation and understanding that her presence here was no coincidence. Preston Harlan has been conducting an extramarital affair with his secretary, Miss Kathy Abernathy, I announced, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. I have photographic evidence, financial records, and documented proof of their relationship spanning the past 8 months. The silence that followed was deafening. Preston's face drained of color as he gripped the microphone stand for support. Kathy, standing near the back of the room, looked like she might faint. Furthermore, Mariana continued, opening the envelope and withdrawing several photographs, Mr. Harlan has been using company funds to finance this relationship. Hotel charges, restaurant bills, and expensive gifts, all paid for with client entertainment budgets and business expense accounts. Oscar Salas, the managing partner, pushed through the crowd toward the stage. This is highly inappropriate. If there are allegations of financial impropriety, they should be handled through proper channels, not like the proper channels that allowed Mr. Harlan to conduct his affair in the office for 8 months. I cut him off. The same proper channels that ignored his use of company resources for personal relationships. Some things require immediate attention. Preston finally found his voice, though it cracked with strain. Harmony, you're having some kind of breakdown. These allegations are completely false. I think you need help. The help I needed was a husband who honored his wedding vows, I replied, my voice steady, despite the emotional chaos surrounding me. Instead, I got receipts. Lots of them. Mariana began distributing copies of the evidence to managing partners and key clients. Hotel receipts with Preston and Kathy's signatures, restaurant charges during supposed client meetings, the Tiffany receipt for a $2,800 necklace that had never been given to me. The jewelry purchase was particularly telling, I continued, addressing the crowd as if discussing a design presentation. Preston claimed it was for a client gift, but the receipt shows it was engraved with Forever Yours, T, the same inscription on my wedding ring. Gasps echoed through the room as the implications sank in. Preston stumbled down from the stage, his face flushed with panic and rage. You're destroying everything we've built together. 8 years of marriage, and this is how you handle a private matter. Private. I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. You made it public when you used company funds. You made it public when you conducted your affair in the office where everyone could see. You made it public when you brought her to every firm event as your indispensable assistant. Kathy pushed through the crowd toward us, tears streaming down her face. This is all wrong. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. You thought you could replace me quietly, gradually. Get Preston his partnership, then have him divorce the wife who was no longer useful to his career advancement. The room erupted in whispered conversations as guests processed the bombshell revelation. Phones appeared as people began documenting the scandal unfolding before them. I could see society reporters frantically taking notes, knowing this would be front-page news in tomorrow's papers. Security, Oscar Solis called out, but Mariana stepped forward with another document. Before you escort anyone out, Mr. Solis, you should know that Mrs. Harlan has also discovered evidence of Mr. Harlan's manipulation of client billing records. The Securities and Exchange Commission will be very interested in how the Whitmore deal was handled. That stopped everyone cold. SEC investigations could destroy careers and result in criminal charges. The managing partner's expressions shifted from embarrassment to panic as they realized this wasn't just a messy divorce playing out in public. It was potential criminal exposure for the firm. Preston grabbed my arm roughly, his composure finally cracking completely. You vindictive bitch. You've just destroyed my career, my reputation, everything I've worked for. No, Preston, I replied, removing his hand from my arm with calm precision. You did that when you chose to betray our marriage and steal from your clients. I just made sure everyone found out at the same time. The crowd parted as hotel security arrived, summoned by the management who were clearly eager to end the spectacle. But the damage was done. Preston Harlan's carefully constructed image lay in ruins on the Rainbow Room floor, shattered as completely as champagne crystal. And for the first time in 8 years, I felt truly free. The hotel security guards approached cautiously, clearly uncertain about how to handle a domestic dispute involving Manhattan's legal elite. The Rainbow Room's management hovered nearby, desperate to contain the chaos threatening their venue's pristine reputation. Ma'am, sir, we're going to need you to take this discussion elsewhere, the head of security said diplomatically, his eyes darting between Preston's furious face and the crowd of influential witnesses. Of course, I replied smoothly, gathering my evening bag. I was just leaving anyway. My attorney and I have said what we came to say. As Mariana and I moved toward the exit, several people approached us with surprising reactions. I'd expected universal condemnation for disrupting such an important social event, but the responses were more complex than anticipated. Mrs. Harlan, a woman's voice called softly. I turned to see Evelyn Chen, wife of prominent investment banker Alex Chen, approaching with determined steps. Could I speak with you privately for a moment? I glanced at Mariana, who nodded. We have a few minutes. Evelyn led us to a quiet corner near the windows, away from the crowd still buzzing with shock and speculation. She was an elegant woman in her 50s, someone I'd seen at numerous society events but never really spoken with beyond polite pleasantries. What you just did took incredible courage, she said quietly, and I wanted you to know you're not alone in this experience. My eyebrows rose in surprise. I'm sorry. 3 years ago, I discovered my husband was having an affair with his assistant. The age-old cliché, she said with bitter humor. But when I confronted him privately, he convinced me it was a momentary lapse in judgment. I stayed quiet, kept the family together, maintained appearances. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she continued. 6 months later, I found out there had been others, many others. My silence had only emboldened him to continue. I wish I'd had your strength to expose it publicly from the beginning. Are you still married? Mariana asked professionally. Divorced now, but it took 2 more years and cost me millions in settlement negotiations. He used my initial silence against me, claimed I'd condoned his behavior by not immediately demanding separation. Evelyn's expression hardened. What you did tonight will strengthen your position enormously. Another voice interrupted our conversation. Mrs. Harlan. We turned to see a young woman approaching hesitantly. She looked to be in her mid-20s, professionally dressed, but clearly shaken by the evening's events. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said nervously. My name is Porter Abernathy. I work at Davidson and Associates downtown. I know this is terrible timing, but I wanted you to know that what happened to you, it's not isolated. Mariana's interest sharpened immediately. What do you mean? Porter glanced around nervously, before continuing. Preston Harlan has a reputation in the legal community. There have been whispers about inappropriate relationships with support staff for years, but no one ever came forward publicly because he's charming, successful, and well-connected, I finished. And the women involved were young employees who couldn't afford to make enemies. Exactly. Porter pulled out her business card. If you decide to pursue this further, criminally or professionally, there are others who might be willing to support your case. Women who left positions abruptly, who signed non-disclosure agreements, who were pressured into silence. I accepted her card, understanding dawning. You're saying Preston has done this before. I'm saying powerful men rarely limit their predatory behavior to one victim, Porter replied carefully. And sometimes it takes one person being brave enough to speak publicly before others find the courage to share their experiences. As we spoke, I noticed several managing partners from Abernathy and Associates huddled in intense conversation near the bar. Their body language was tense, their expressions grim. The revelation about potential SEC violations had clearly shifted this from a personal scandal to a professional crisis. They're calculating damage control, Mariana observed, following my gaze, wondering how much the firm knew, how much they can claim ignorance about, how to distance themselves from Preston before the authorities get involved. A distinguished older man approached our group, Judge Harrison Solis, someone I recognized from various charity events. His presence surprised me. Judges typically avoided involving themselves in public scandals. Mrs. Harlan, he said quietly, I wanted to express my support for your courage tonight. I've presided over too many cases where women suffered in silence while men abused their power with impunity. Thank you, Your Honor. I also wanted you to know that if criminal charges are filed related to the financial improprieties you've uncovered, the court system will take them very seriously. Men who steal from clients while conducting affairs show a pattern of believing themselves above the law. His words carried unmistakable weight. Having a respected judge publicly align himself with my position would send shockwaves through the legal community. Meanwhile, across the room, I could see Preston surrounded by his remaining allies. Oscar Solis was speaking urgently into his phone, likely with the firm's crisis management team. Several younger associates kept glancing in my direction with expressions ranging from admiration to fear. The battle lines were becoming clear. On one side, Preston and the institutional power structure that had protected and promoted him. On the other, a growing coalition of women who'd experienced similar treatment, legal professionals who valued integrity over connections, and influential voices willing to support accountability over reputation management. This is just the beginning, Mariana murmured as we prepared to leave. Once the story breaks tomorrow, there will be a feeding frenzy. Media attention, professional investigations, other victims coming forward. I nodded, accepting the reality that my life was about to become a very public battleground. But for the first time in months, I felt like I had an army behind me, instead of facing the fight alone. As we walked toward the elevators, my phone buzzed with text messages from friends who'd heard about the confrontation. Some offered support, others expressed shock, a few suggested I should have handled things privately, but the message that mattered most came from an unknown number. Saw what happened tonight. Preston did the same thing to me 2 years ago. I have documentation, ready to talk whenever you are. The truth, it seemed, had a way of attracting more truth, and Preston Harlan was about to discover that his pattern of behavior had left a very long trail of evidence. The next morning dawned gray and cold, matching my emotional state as I sat in my kitchen reading the newspaper coverage of last night's confrontation. The New York Times had run a front-page story titled "Legal Elite Rocked by Affair Scandal," complete with a photograph of Preston's shocked face as I delivered my accusations. The Post had gone with the more sensational, "Cheating lawyer's wife crashes party," accompanied by a grainy cell phone photo someone had taken during the chaos. My phone had been ringing since 6 a.m. with calls from reporters, friends, and strangers. I'd turned off the ringer after the 15th call, letting everything go to voicemail while I tried to process the magnitude of what I'd set in motion. The anonymous text from last night haunted me. Another victim, another woman Preston had manipulated and discarded. How many others were there? How long had this pattern of behavior been going on? At 9 a.m. sharp, my doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw a young woman with short dark hair, nervously clutching a manila folder. She looked familiar, though I couldn't immediately place her. "Mrs. Harlan, my name is Alex Salas. I sent you the text message last night." I buzzed her in, studying her face as she climbed the stairs to my front door. She was perhaps 28, professionally dressed in a conservative gray suit that suggested legal work. Her dark eyes held a mixture of determination and fear that I recognized from my own mirror. "Thank you for coming," I said, leading her to the living room. "Would you like coffee, please?" Her hands shook slightly as she set down her folder. "I didn't sleep at all last night. When I saw what you did at the party, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore." As I prepared coffee, Alex began her story. "I worked as a paralegal at Abernathy and Associates 2 years ago. Preston was assigned as my supervising attorney on the Morrison acquisition, a $600 million deal that required extensive document review." She accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the mug as if seeking warmth. "At first everything was professional. Preston was charming, brilliant, everything you'd expect from a rising star. He praised my work, said I had potential for law school, offered to mentor me. The familiar pattern made my stomach clench. When did things change? Gradually. Late-night work sessions where he'd order dinner and wine. Weekend meetings at hotels, supposedly to review confidential documents away from the office. He made it seem like I was special, chosen for important responsibilities." Alex opened her folder, revealing emails, hotel receipts and photographs. "He was careful at first, nothing that could be traced back to firm accounts, but as the relationship progressed, he became bolder." She handed me a printed email chain. "These are messages discussing my promotion to senior paralegal, a position that required certain personal commitments to ensure project success. When I started to pull back, questioning the appropriateness of our relationship, he became threatening. The emails were damning. Preston's professional tone gradually shifting to manipulation, then to subtle threats about career consequences if Alex didn't maintain their arrangement. The final message, sent just before Alex left the firm, was particularly chilling. "Discretion is essential in our industry. I trust you understand the importance of protecting client confidentiality and firm reputation." "He made me sign an NDA when I left," Alex continued. "A standard non-disclosure agreement that supposedly protected client information, but it was worded broadly enough to cover our personal relationship. I got a generous severance package and excellent references, provided I never discussed my client work with anyone." "What made you decide to come forward now?" I asked. "Your courage last night. Watching you stand up publicly to someone who seemed untouchable." Alex's voice strengthened with resolve. "And because I found out I wasn't the only one." She pulled out another document. A list of names with dates and brief notes. "I did some research after leaving Abernathy and Associates. Other women who'd worked with Preston, who'd left abruptly with generous settlements and glowing references. I reached out to a few of them." My heart sank as I scanned the list. 7 names spanning 5 years. All young women, all in support positions, all following the same pattern of rapid promotion, followed by sudden departure. 3 of them were willing to talk privately. Alex said. "Kathy isn't Preston's first secretary relationship. She's his latest. There was Jessica before her. And Monica before that. Each one lasted about a year before he moved on to someone new." The scope of Preston's deception was breathtaking. This wasn't just an affair, it was a systematic pattern of exploiting young women under his professional authority. "There's more," Alex said quietly. "The financial irregularities you mentioned last night aren't limited to personal expenses. Preston has been manipulating client billing records for years, inflating hours and charging personal expenses to client accounts. I have documentation of at least $200,000 in fraudulent billing over 2 years." She handed me a USB drive. Bank records, email correspondence, billing statements, everything I copied before I left the firm. "I thought about going to the authorities at the time, but he had too much power, and you were just starting your career." I finished. "I understand completely." My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Mariana's name appeared on the screen. "Harmony, we need to meet immediately," she said, without preamble. The SEC called this morning. They're opening a formal investigation into Abernathy and Associates, based on your allegations last night. They want to interview you this afternoon. I looked at Alex, who had gone pale at the mention of the SEC. I'm not alone in this. There are other victims ready to come forward. Even better, bring whoever you have to my office at 2 p.m. We're going to need all the evidence we can gather. After hanging up, I turned to Alex. Are you prepared for this to become very public? Once the SEC gets involved, there's no going back. Alex squared her shoulders, some of the fear leaving her eyes. Preston destroyed my trust in the legal system I wanted to join. He made me question my own judgment and professional worth. If coming forward can prevent him from doing this to other women, then yes, I'm ready. As we gathered the evidence and prepared to meet with Mariana, I realized that what had started as personal betrayal and revenge was evolving into something much larger. Preston's pattern of abuse represented systemic problems in how powerful men exploited their positions, how institutions protected predators, and how victims were silenced through legal and financial pressure. But this time would be different. This time the silence was broken, the evidence was documented, and the victims were ready to speak truth to power, no matter the consequences. Mariana's law office occupied the entire 42nd floor of a gleaming tower in Midtown, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering commanding views of Manhattan's legal district. The conference room where we gathered felt like a war room, with documents spread across the mahogany table, and whiteboards covered in timeline charts and financial calculations. Alex sat beside me, still clutching her folder of evidence like a lifeline. Across from us, Mariana reviewed the USB drive contents on her laptop, her expression growing more grim with each document she examined. This is extensive, she said finally, looking up from the screen. Preston Harlan has been operating a systematic scheme of financial fraud, sexual harassment, and intimidation for at least 5 years. The evidence you've both provided creates a compelling case for both criminal prosecution and civil action. She turned her laptop toward us, displaying a spreadsheet Alex had created. The billing fraud alone amounts to over $300,000 across multiple client accounts. But it's the pattern of behavior toward female employees that makes this particularly damaging. How damaging? I asked. Career-ending, potentially criminal charges for wire fraud, sexual harassment, and abuse of fiduciary duty. The SEC investigation will likely expand to include the entire firm's billing practices, which could result in massive fines and loss of licenses. A knock at the conference room door interrupted our discussion. Mariana's assistant entered with 2 more women, both looking nervous but determined. Mrs. Harlan, I'd like you to meet Jessica Chen and Monica Abernathy, Mariana said. Alex contacted them yesterday, and they've agreed to join our case. Jessica, a petite Asian woman in her late 20s, worked as a paralegal at a competing firm downtown. Monica, a striking blonde about my age, had left the legal field entirely after her experience with Preston. As they shared their stories, the pattern became even clearer and more disturbing. Preston told me I was special, Jessica said quietly, that he saw partner potential in me, that he wanted to personally mentor my career development. The relationship started during the Anderson merger, long hours, private meetings, expensive dinners he claimed were business development. Monica's story was nearly identical, but with a darker twist. When I tried to end things, he threatened to destroy my career. He had connections at every major firm in the city, he said. One phone call from him could make sure I never worked in corporate law again. Did he follow through on the threats? Mariana asked, taking detailed notes. I was blacklisted from 3 firms where I'd received job offers, Monica replied. HR representatives suddenly became unavailable. Interview processes stalled indefinitely. I eventually had to leave New York entirely to find work. I felt sick listening to their experiences, realizing how calculated Preston's manipulation had been. He hadn't just betrayed our marriage, he'd systematically abused his position to exploit young women seeking to advance their careers.
What about the NDAs?
I asked. Can they speak publicly? Mariana smiled coldly. Non-disclosure agreements signed under duress or to cover up illegal activity are unenforceable. Preston's lawyers were clever, but not clever enough. These women can testify without legal consequences. She pulled up another document on her laptop. I've also been researching Abernathy and Associates insurance policies and partnership agreements. The firm carries substantial liability coverage, but there are exclusions for criminal activity and willful misconduct. If we can prove the partners knew about Preston's behavior, the personal exposure could be significant. Do we think they knew? Alex asked. Oscar Solis has been managing partner for 12 years, I said. He would have approved Preston's rapid advancement, his corner office, his increased autonomy with client accounts. The pattern was there if anyone cared to look. Mariana nodded. That's our strategy. We pursue both Preston individually and the firm institutionally. Criminal referrals to the SEC and local prosecutors for the financial crimes, civil suits for the harassment and discrimination, and media pressure to ensure accountability. She distributed thick folders to each of us. These contain legal documentation, timeline charts, and contact information for journalists covering corporate malfeasance. The Times reporter who covered last night's story is particularly interested in the broader implications. What about retaliation? Monica asked nervously. Preston still has friends in powerful positions.
That's why we're moving quickly and
Publicly, Mariana explained. The more attention this receives, the harder it becomes for anyone to pressure or intimidate witnesses. We're also filing protective orders to prevent contact between Preston and any of you. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from my mother. I declined it, but Mariana noticed my expression. Family pressure? She asked. My parents think I should have handled this privately. Preserve dignity, protect the family reputation, find a quiet divorce settlement that doesn't embarrass anyone. The traditional approach that allows men like Preston to continue their patterns with new victims, Jessica said bitterly. Exactly. We're breaking that cycle by making everything public, Mariana said. But you need to prepare for significant pushback from your social circle. People will try to convince you that you're overreacting, that you should think about Preston's career and reputation. His career and reputation should have been his concern when he chose to steal from clients and manipulate employees, I replied firmly. Mariana's assistant knocked again, entering with urgent news. The SEC investigator called. They want to schedule interviews with all the witnesses for tomorrow morning. And there's something else. Abernathy and Associates just announced that Preston Harlan has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. A cheer went up around the table. The firm was already distancing itself from Preston, recognizing the liability he represented. His career was effectively over, regardless of what criminal charges might follow. This is happening faster than I expected, Mariana said, clearly pleased. Preston's allies are abandoning him, which means he'll be increasingly desperate. We need to be prepared for him to lash out. As if summoned by her words, my phone rang again. This time Preston's name appeared on the screen. I looked at Mariana, who nodded and activated a recording app. Hello, Preston, I answered, putting the call on speaker. Harmony. His voice was strained, barely controlled. We need to talk. This has gone too far. You're destroying innocent people along with me. The only innocent people in this situation are the women you manipulated and the clients you stole from, I replied calmly. I never stole anything. Those were legitimate business expenses. Recorded hotel rooms where you conducted affairs, jewelry for your mistresses, restaurant bills for romantic dinners while you told me you were working late. The silence stretched for several seconds before he spoke again, his voice now cold and threatening. You have no idea what you've started, Harmony. I have resources you can't imagine, friends and positions you don't even know exist. This war you think you're winning, you haven't seen anything yet. I looked around the table at the women who had found the courage to speak out, at the lawyer who specialized in destroying powerful men who abused their positions, at the evidence that would ensure Preston faced consequences for his actions. You're right, Preston, I said quietly. I haven't seen anything yet, but neither have you. The threatening phone call was just the beginning. Over the next 48 hours, Preston's desperation manifested in increasingly aggressive attempts to undermine our case and intimidate the women who had come forward. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly my own social circle would turn against me, pressured by connections to Preston's powerful allies. The first blow came from my own family. My mother arrived at my house unannounced Thursday morning, her face tight with the controlled fury I remembered from childhood disappointments. Julia Elizabeth, she said, using my full name in the tone that had once made me shrink with shame. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family's reputation? I led her to the living room, noting how she examined the space with critical eyes, as if looking for signs of the emotional breakdown she clearly expected to find. I exposed a criminal, Mother. I protected other women from being victimized. I stood up for myself after years of betrayal. You threw a public tantrum that's made us all look ridiculous, she snapped. Your father has fielded calls from 3 board members asking about your mental stability. The Whitmore family has withdrawn their support for the hospital fundraiser because they don't want to be associated with this scandal. She pulled out her phone, showing me a gossip blog post titled, "Socialites' Revenge Gone Wrong." The article painted me as an unstable wife who had fabricated allegations against a successful husband, complete with anonymous quotes, suggesting I'd been struggling with infertility-related depression. Preston's public relations team is very good, my mother continued coldly. They're positioning you as the troubled wife of a brilliant attorney who made one mistake. Your credibility is being systematically destroyed while you play amateur detective. Let them try, I said, though the words stung more than I wanted to admit. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence that could disappear if the right pressure is applied to the right people. Alex Solis has already received a job offer in Seattle. A very generous offer that would require her to relocate immediately and sign additional confidentiality agreements. My blood chilled. How do you know about Alex? Because Oscar Solis is your father's golf partner, and they've been discussing how to contain this situation before it destroys multiple careers. Alex's father works for a company that does significant business with ours. One phone call could change her family's financial situation dramatically. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The network of connections and mutual dependencies that made Manhattan's elite function was being weaponized against the women brave enough to speak out. Preston wasn't fighting this battle alone. He had the entire power structure supporting him. My phone rang, interrupting the tense conversation. Mariana's name appeared on the screen. I need to take this, I told my mother, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. We have problems, Mariana said without preamble. Jessica Chen just called. Her firm received an anonymous tip about alleged ethical violations in her work, triggering an internal investigation. Monica's landlord in Boston suddenly discovered code violations in her building, and is threatening eviction unless expensive repairs are made immediately. They're going after everyone, I said, feeling the walls closing in. It gets worse. The Times reporter who was investigating the story has been reassigned to cover City Hall. Her editor claimed it was routine rotation, but she suspects pressure from above. And the SEC investigator postponed our interviews indefinitely, citing the need to verify witness credibility. I leaned against the kitchen counter, overwhelmed by the coordinated nature of the attack. Preston had claimed to have resources and friends in positions I couldn't imagine, and he was proving it systematically. There's more, Mariana continued. I received a call from opposing counsel this morning. They're prepared to offer you a substantial settlement, enough to buy a house in the Hamptons and maintain your current lifestyle, if you agree to drop all allegations and sign a comprehensive NDA. How substantial? $12 million, plus guaranteed contracts for your design business with 3 major real estate developers. It's enough to disappear comfortably and never work again if you choose. The offer was staggering, designed to be tempting enough to overcome principle and pride. For a moment I allowed myself to imagine taking the money and walking away. A fresh start somewhere far from Manhattan's poisonous social dynamics, where I could rebuild my life without the constant pressure of public scrutiny. What would happen to the other women if I took it? I asked. Their cases would likely collapse without your testimony as the catalyst. Preston would face minimal consequences, probably a quiet resignation and relocation to another firm in a different city. The pattern would continue with new victims. Through the kitchen window, I could see photographers camped across the street, telephoto lenses trained on my house. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters and lawyers. The peaceful life I'd built in this house felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway, having obviously overheard parts of the conversation. $12 million, Harmony. More than enough to start over anywhere you want, and leave Preston free to do this to other women. That's not your responsibility. You've made your point. Take the money and move on with dignity and tact. But as I stood there, I thought about Alex's shaking hands as she'd described Preston's threats, about Jessica's career being sabotaged for speaking truth, about Monica having to flee New York entirely to escape retaliation, about all the women who might come after them if powerful men learned they could buy their way out of accountability with enough money and pressure. No, I said, finally surprising myself with the firmness of my voice. I'm not taking their money. My mother's expression hardened. Then you're on your own. Your father and I cannot support a decision that damages our family's standing in this community. If you choose this path, you choose it without us. After she left, I called Mariana back. I'm not taking the settlement. I was hoping you'd say that, she replied. Because I have a counter strategy. It's risky, and it requires you to be willing to go even more public than you already have. But if it works, we can turn Preston's pressure campaign against him. What do you have in mind? A press conference. All the victims together, presenting a united front with full documentation. We make this so public that any attempt at retaliation becomes evidence of obstruction of justice. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. No more hiding, no more careful legal maneuvering. Just truth, spoken publicly by women who refuse to be silenced by money or threats. When? I asked. Tomorrow morning. Before they can apply more pressure or make the other women disappear. As I hung up and prepared for what felt like the final battle, I realized that Preston had made a crucial miscalculation. He'd assumed that enough pressure would make me fold, that my privileged background meant I valued reputation over principle. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The Javits Center press conference room was packed beyond capacity, with overflow crowds watching on closed-circuit television in adjacent spaces. Camera crews from every major network jostled for position, while reporters lined the walls with notepads and recording devices. The energy was electric, charged with the anticipation of a story that had already captivated the nation's attention. I sat at the head table between Mariana and Alex, with Jessica and Monica flanking us on either side. 2 additional women had joined us overnight, former Abernathy and Associates employees, who had found the courage to come forward after seeing our determination to proceed despite the mounting pressure. Ladies and gentlemen, Mariana began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. We are here today to address systematic sexual harassment, financial fraud, and institutional cover-up at one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms. The room fell silent, except for the clicking of camera shutters. I could see reporters frantically typing on their phones, already filing preliminary stories about what promised to be a bombshell revelation. Preston Harlan's pattern of predatory behavior spans 5 years and involves at least 7 women we've identified so far. Mariana continued. But this isn't just about one man's crimes. It's about a system that protects powerful predators while silencing their victims through financial pressure and legal intimidation. She gestured to our table. Each of these women has risked her career, her reputation, and her personal safety to speak truth to power. In the past week, they've faced retaliation attempts including job threats, housing issues, and family pressure designed to force their silence. Alex leaned toward her microphone, her voice steady, despite the cameras focused on her face. I want every young woman entering the legal profession to know that you don't have to accept abuse as the price of career advancement. You don't have to choose between your dignity and your dreams. Jessica spoke next, describing how Preston's manipulation had made her question her own judgment and professional abilities. He convinced me that the inappropriate relationship was somehow my fault, that I had invited his attention through my ambition and dedication. What happened to me wasn't unique, I said finally. The only unique thing was that I had enough privilege and resources to fight back publicly. Most women don't have that luxury. Which is exactly why we need you in this role, he replied. You understand the power dynamics, the institutional barriers, the personal cost of speaking out. You can help other women navigate these challenges. My phone rang. Evelyn, calling with her daily update on how my situation was affecting the family's social standing. I declined the call, realizing that this conversation represented a choice between my old life and something entirely new. I'll take the position, I said, surprised by the certainty in my voice. But I have conditions. Name them. Jessica Chen gets first consideration for any paralegal positions. Alex Solis receives a full scholarship if she decides to attend law school, and Monica Abernathy gets consulting work helping us develop our victim support protocols. Alex Chen smiled, extending his hand. Consider it done. When can you start? Monday, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. I have a feeling we're going to be very busy. As I left the building and walked through Manhattan's financial district, I realized that Preston's betrayal had inadvertently led me to work that felt more meaningful than any interior design project ever had. Instead of creating beautiful spaces for wealthy clients, I'd be creating safe spaces for vulnerable employees. The transformation from socialite wife to workplace advocate wasn't one I'd ever planned, but it was proving to be exactly what I needed, and what countless other women needed as well. 3 months later, I received an unexpected call from the Manhattan Correctional Center. Preston was requesting a meeting, his first attempt at contact since his guilty plea and sentencing. After consulting with Mariana, I agreed to see him, curious about what he could possibly want to say after everything that had happened. The visiting room was sterile and depressing, all gray concrete and fluorescent lighting. Preston appeared diminished in his orange jumpsuit, his once perfect appearance replaced by the pallor and weight loss of incarceration. The confident attorney who had charmed judges and clients seemed like a different person entirely. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, his hands folded on the metal table between us. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't," I replied honestly. "What do you want, Preston?" He was silent for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes held something I'd never seen before. Genuine remorse mixed with the broken pride of a man who had lost everything. "I want to apologize, not the strategic apology my lawyers crafted for the sentencing hearing, but a real one. What I did to you, to those women, to our marriage, there's no excuse for any of it." I studied his face, searching for signs of manipulation or calculated performance. But the man sitting across from me seemed genuinely broken, stripped of the charm and confidence that had defined him for so long. "Why now?" I asked. "Why after months of legal battles and public humiliation?" "Because I've had time to think. Really think, without distractions or enablers, or people telling me what I wanted to hear." He gestured around the visiting room. "This place has a way of forcing honesty. And what honest conclusions have you reached?" "That I became a predator, not accidentally, or gradually, deliberately. I used my position to manipulate women who trusted me, who looked up to me professionally. I betrayed you repeatedly, while accepting your love and support. I stole from clients who trusted me with their most important transactions." His voice cracked slightly as he continued. "I convinced myself I deserved all of it, the affairs, the money, the admiration, because I was brilliant and successful. I thought the rules didn't apply to me, because I was special. And now I'm a convicted felon in prison, and every woman I claim to care about is better off without me in their lives. Kathy included. She's in therapy, working to understand how I manipulated her into participating in something that destroyed both our careers." I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for Kathy, remembering how young and vulnerable she'd seemed that day in Preston's office. She'd been a victim too, even if I hadn't been able to see it at the time. "What do you want from me, Preston?" I asked again. "Nothing," he said, and for the first time in our conversation, he met my eyes directly. "I don't want forgiveness, or reconciliation or understanding. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did. To you, to them, to myself." He paused, then continued more quietly. "I also wanted you to know that what you did, exposing everything publicly, fighting back instead of suffering in silence. It was brave, braver than anything I ever did in my entire career. It was necessary," I corrected. "Not brave, necessary. For other women, yes, but also for you. The harmony I married would have handled this privately, quietly, the way your mother wanted. She would have preserved appearances, and suffered in silence. The woman sitting across from me now is stronger than I ever gave you credit for." I realized he was right. The woman who had discovered his ring in Kathy's purse would have confronted him privately, demanded explanations, maybe threatened divorce. She wouldn't have had the courage or clarity to expose his crimes publicly and fight the entire power structure that protected him. I'm different now, I acknowledged. Everything that happened forced me to become someone new. Someone better, he said quietly. I've read about your work at Chen and Associates. You're helping women I hurt, and others like them. You turned my betrayal into something positive. As our time ended and guards prepared to escort him back to his cell, Preston spoke one final time. I hope someday you can look back on this and see it as the beginning of your real life, not just the end of our fake one. Walking out of the correctional center into the bright afternoon sunlight, I realized he was right. The perfect life I'd thought I was living had been an elaborate performance, maintained through willful blindness and social conditioning. The life I was building now, messy, public, challenging but authentic, was entirely my own. 1 year after finding Preston's wedding ring in Kathy's purse, I hosted a dinner party in my new apartment overlooking Central Park. The space was smaller than the Westchester house I'd sold, but it felt infinitely more authentic, decorated with pieces I'd chosen for personal meaning rather than social impression, filled with people who knew my story and supported my journey. Alex Solis sat at my dining table, now a first-year law student at Columbia with a full scholarship funded by the Victim Advocacy Foundation we'd established. Jessica Chen had joined my team at Chen and Associates as a paralegal, her experience with Preston's manipulation making her invaluable in helping other victims navigate their own cases. Monica Abernathy flew in from Boston, where she'd rebuilt her career in corporate compliance, helping companies audit their policies before scandals erupted. To second chances, I said, raising my glass of wine as the evening wound down, and to the courage to take them. To women who refuse to stay silent, Alex added, her glass joining mine. To justice served publicly, Jessica contributed with a satisfied smile. To friendship forged in battle, Monica concluded, and we clinked glasses with the easy camaraderie of people who had survived something together. As my guests prepared to leave, Mariana lingered in my kitchen, helping load the dishwasher with the casual intimacy of someone who had become both colleague and close friend. Have you seen the Times article about the Workplace Justice Act? She asked, referencing the federal legislation that had grown out of our case and the movement it sparked. Evelyn sent me the link this morning, I replied, noting how natural it felt to reference my mother by her first name rather than the formal mother of my previous life. Our relationship had evolved into something more honest after she'd realized that my disgrace had actually elevated the family's profile in progressive circles. 43 major corporations have implemented new harassment reporting protocols based on your framework, Mariana continued. The Chen and Associates model is becoming the industry standard. I smiled, remembering how terrified I'd been that first day in Alex Chen's office, accepting a job I'd never imagined wanting. Now I couldn't picture doing anything else. The work was challenging, often heartbreaking, but it carried a sense of purpose that interior design had never provided. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Harlan, I saw your interview on 60 Minutes. My situation is similar to what happened to you. Is there someone I can talk to? I showed the message to Mariana, who shook her head with familiar frustration. They never stop coming, she said. Every week, more women find the courage to speak out. Good, I replied, already mentally composing my response to connect this woman with resources and support. The silence is broken now, it can't be rebuilt. As Mariana left and I settled into my living room with a final glass of wine, I reflected on the journey from that shocking moment in Preston's office to this quiet evening surrounded by genuine friends. The price of authenticity had been steep: social ostracism, financial uncertainty, family strain, and public scrutiny that sometimes felt overwhelming. But sitting in my apartment, looking out at the city lights and thinking about the women whose lives had been changed by our collective courage to speak truth to power, I knew I wouldn't trade this messy, challenging real life for the beautiful illusion I'd lost. The perfect wife was gone forever. In her place was someone I actually respected, a woman who had chosen justice over comfort, authenticity over appearance, and solidarity over silence. The transformation was complete, and for the first time in years, I was genuinely proud of who I had become. Preston had been right about one thing during our final conversation. This hadn't been the end of my life at all. It had been the beginning of the life I was always meant to live.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.